Adidas guy here. Welcome to the Bike Cave again. Today we have a serious problem we have to fix with Susie. Unfortunately, what happened is her starter gear, or the magnet rotor, came loose off of the crankshaft, and so she won't start. Let me show you what that sounds like. She's in neutral, so let's stand up, clutch in. If you hear this type of a sound, what that means is the starter clutch, starter motor is working. That connects to the starter gear. The starter gear has a clutch connected to your magnet rotor, and your magnet rotor bolts onto the crankshaft. The bolt on the crankshaft has come loose. Interestingly, I hear all the people bitching and complaining about vacuum petcocks going bad, which the most I've ever seen them is get dirty. They always work fine, and they want to replace them with all kinds of crazy stuff. More often you've got fork seals going bad, chains going bad, brake pads going bad, but nobody ever talks about, welding your forks. Well, I have had 3 of these come loose. This is the 3rd one. It's not a hard thing to fix, but we're going to have to drain the oil out. Haven't heard anybody talk about welding your magneto onto the crankshaft, because that comes loose more often than you have a vacuum petcock go bad. And again, the vacuum petcock, the little guy right there, all you got to do is generally clean it or make sure your lines are okay and you'll be fine. So what we're going to do, we're going to take off the fairings. I've already got a video on doing that, so I'm not going to show you that. We've got to drain the oil, and since the oil is fresh, I can put it into a clean container and put it back in. But we have to take the oil out, we have to take off the clutch cover, and we then have to take off this right side cover because all of that is bathed in oil. We're going to get everything off to the point where we're ready to take this off, and then we'll continue on fixing Susie, and I'll show you exactly what's wrong with her. It's a little bit time consuming to do it, but it's not a hard thing to do if you've got the right tools. So let's step 1, get her up on the center stand. We're going to want to do that. There she is. Now I'm going to take everything off. She's got the RNG frame slider, so I have to take that off first. I'll take off this side of the fairing. Again, there's a video on that. And that's pretty straightforward to take off. Take off your shift lever, undo the bolts, take that out. And then we'll take this off and get inside and show you what's wrong with her, and we'll fix her pretty quick. Okay, time for a break. Okay, now that I've taken the side covers off, taken this cover off, I've noticed down here some oil. There's some fresh oil down here. It's actually dripping from the side case. My guess would be that these bolts hadn't been torqued down since the bike was probably built. I had a service contract originally, and they didn't do a very good job. There's all the other gunk around here from chain oil. I'll probably clean a lot of that out before I put everything back together. But our main goal is now we're going to drain the oil. I'm ready to do that. All the covers are off. I'll drain the oil, and then we'll take this cover off and see what condition the gasket's in. But no doubt put a new gasket on when I put everything back together. Okay, well, the oil is drained. Leaving the drip pan under here because oil is going to come out as I take off the side cover. The stator is in there. The magnet assembly, so with the stator and the magnets it wants to kind of keep itself on. So I'm going to crack each nut first a little bit. Just give a little tug. The thing about bolts, if you just tug on them you might break them. So you give them a little quick hit. It's like an impact wrench. And it breaks the seal. Okay, I've got all of them, and now I can take them all off. tray that I put everything into. Each bolt only goes in one place. There are a couple different lengths, but you know you got the right one when you go to put them back in. It sticks out about 1/4 inch. So I could mark the positions if I wanted to, but I don't need to, since I know the different length bolts, each one only goes in one place. It's a beautiful day today here in Seattle. One of our rare days where we've got sun. So all the neighbors and everybody is out having a good time. Bolt. As you're working, always have a tray to throw your stuff into. Sometimes even a compartmentalized tray helps, so you can divide parts up as to where you took them off. Okay, we put them all off. Now, okay, we're gonna have. Well, I grabbed a big wrench. There's a spot under here. It seems like a good spot. So just apply a little bit of pressure. So I'll go in there, apply a little pressure, and turn loose. Now we wiggle off carefully. It wants to pull itself back on because of the magneto, and also this wire clip right under here, which has the stator wire. It's right under here. So you want to make sure you bend that clip back to free up this wire. That's your stator. Now, the magnets are holding it on. So let's pull off slowly and gently. He's coming. There he is. Okay, this is the pin for the starter gear. There's your stator. This is our gasket. That gasket, look at this. It wasn't even put on correctly. So no wonder there was a leak. This will get a new gasket before I close things back up. Now, I'm just going to let this dangle over here. And here's our starter. So our starter motor is here. Turns this, which then turns that to turn the engine. Now look, notice this bolt isn't turning. This is connected to the crankshaft of the motor. I can turn my magnet assembly and this bolt isn't turning, meaning the crankshaft isn't turning. This bolt is loose. Look at that. That's why she won't start. So we're going to be taking this off. And when we take it off, we take off the entire starter gear with the clutch on it as one assembly. There's a clutch mechanism in there with some springs and a few pins. We don't want that to come apart. So let's take this off and get ready to pull off the starter. And let's see the size of that. That's too big. 18, 16, no. 17. This is already loose. You know, I don't have to do much work. If I was going to remove this from my motor for repair or whatever reason and it's locked on, I would have to go by the directions to really lock up everything correctly and get this bolt off. But it's loose. That's what my problem is. It came loose. So I don't have to free up anything or lock anything down to get this guy off. If I did want to, there's some flat spots there. You need a 22mm flat wrench. to keep this all from turning, or also having your motor in gear can help. My magnets and everything are good. Finish taking this off. There. Now, I'm going to grab a couple tools, and if you did have to take this off, there's a way you can remove this without having to buy a lot of fancy expensive tools. Okay. The first time I had to remove one of these, the Haynes manual, I looked in the Haynes, the Climber, and the Suzuki manual. All of them had a different way of doing it, but the Haynes manual had a real simple way to do it. The Haynes manual says to make a spacer. So I took a bolt, cut it off to the recommended length of 36 millimeters. Then you would slip that in there, and that'll go all the way in. And then use a bolt of the correct threads, M19 by 1, according to my little chart there. And you would screw this in, and what it will do is it'll push on this spacer and pop this off. So that's how you get your magnet assembly off real easy. A 36 millimeter spacer that'll go all the way in. Use a small axle bolt or some strong bolt to do that. And an M19 by 1.0, which according to the Haynes book is also the same as a swing arm bolt. That's how you would get that guy off. All right, now let's take him off, but we want to take him off with, okay, there we go. Everything is off. Notice it's a press fit. It's all greasy. So what I'm going to do is clean it. I'm going to score this before we put it back on. But that's what it is. And notice that this turns one direction. So when it's starting the engine, it cranks it this way. Then when the engine's running, it just spins freely. So I will clean all of this off. And when I'm ready to put everything back together, I will come back. Well, I've gone through quite a bit of work, had a beer. It's now time to start putting everything back together. And by the way, all this up here that you may have noticed is extra inside the fairing lighting to kind of make the bike glow a little bit. So I've done a couple of things that the book says to do. One of them is, this is spotless. There is not a bit of oil on it. I've used alcohol to clean it. As we continue, I'm going to make sure I have clean gloves on my hands. Okay, the rotor with the starter gear is spotless. The shaft in there has been thoroughly cleaned with alcohol and dry towels, so there's not a spot of anything on it. I completely pulled out the stator wire so I could clean all of this surface. But right now we're going to put this on, as putting this back on isn't that big of a task. So let's get the rotor back on according to the spec. Okay, it's spotless. The bolt is also spotless. Now, put this in, we'll put it on. There we go. Now some thread lock. We're starting to tighten. Okay. Now we have to tighten down to spec. That is a 17 millimeter. Notice everything rotates. What I do, and this isn't according to the book, so don't quote me on this. Because I'm going clockwise, I will stick a wrench in those gears. And now I tighten. Now I will tighten to spec. We've got our torque wrench. The book says 110 to 130 Newton meters. I've set it for 128. And now let's tighten it. Remember, I've got my wrench in there to keep it from turning. And there it goes. That was enough to rock the bike. We are at the right spot. So that should hold. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. Again, this is not by the book, this is just experience. I am going to hit it once with an impact wrench. I'm not going to break anything, that thing is so darn tight and hard. We're going to give it one hit. We're going to do one hit. That's loose. That's tight. Let's give it one little hit. Okay. We're now tight. This now turns the engine. We are now ready to put the cover back on and everything else. I'm going to do one little thing just to, not by the book. Now there's no oil in, but I'm going to hit the starter button once. I just want to show you how this works. Okay, here we go. That's how it works. So, I think we're going to be okay. I'm going to put my gasket back on. I have a Suzuki OEM gasket. Some gaskets, people say are better than others, but I have an OEM one. I'll make sure the oil passages do not get clogged. It's just weird that I've heard of other people with have this come loose and not know what it was. And I don't know why. But probably just not to spec by the factory. But it's clean, it's spotless, and the critical thing was when you're putting this back on, everything must be absolutely spotless because it is a press fit. And because it's a press fit, if there's a drop of oil in there, it's going to not give you a good contact of steel to steel, and it's going to work its way loose again. And I do want to show you one little thing to be cautious about when you button it up. I've got the gasket on. I put a little bit of gasket sealer on both sides just to help, especially since she was leaking before. All the surfaces were cleaned. This has to go on straight. Very, very straight, because you've got a magnet that's going to be pulling this thing in. You've got one guide pin here that goes here. So we've got to go very careful so we don't damage anything and line ourselves up. And in a moment the magnet's just going to grab and pull, and there it goes. It pulled. There we go. We're back on. Now we're going to tighten up the bolts to spec. We're going to put covers back on, and then we'll start her up after we put oil back in. When you go to put this on, the magnet's just going to grab, so you've got to hold tight and make sure you go very straight so you don't damage your stator or you damage the magnets. There's very tight tolerance between the stator and the magnet assembly. And if you go in crooked, you could damage those magnets, and then that's going to be even a bigger problem for you, because the magnet assembly is not a cheap guy to replace. Remember, under here we had this clip that held in the stator wire. It's very important that you get that back in there, and the other wire right there. So if you fail to do that, your stator wire could come down and contact your chain. So be sure you have that done. Now that that's there, I'll put the clutch cover back on. There we go. I'll put that on. I'll reroute my stator wire, put her in oil. Don't think there's anything else I need to say right now until we're ready to start her. So other than make sure everything is back together, make sure everything is torqued to spec. These bolts over here don't have to be that tight. They don't hold anything in. They're just the clutch cover. These torque to spec, go randomly, so it pulls the whole thing down evenly. And make sure you've got your gasket on there, and you should be good to go. After you put oil in, watch it for a couple of days to look for any leaks. You may have to retorque things down if you missed a bolt. So, I'm going to finish up, and I will see you again in a moment when we are ready to start her up. And we'll show that Susie's back working again. She's back together. Cover's on. I'm not seeing any oil leaks. So I'm going to start her up. Remember, I'm not finishing putting her back together today. I don't even need to show you that because I'm going to do some more cleaning and other work on her. Just some general maintenance and cleanup. But we've taken care of the major thing. Cover's back on. No oil leaks. Everything's torqued to spec. A little bit of thread lock on every bolt also. So, she's in neutral. I haven't put the shift lever back on. But let's start her up. Not bad. No choke. Let's give her a little bit of choke. Well, I would call that a success. She starts, you know, if that lasts for a couple weeks, we've done a perfect job of fixing it. I doubt that that's ever going to come loose. We're very cautious about making sure everything is clean, spotless, torqued to spec, and then some. So, Susie's done. Now I'm going to get busy with all the other stuff. I want to clean her, check all the bolts, do everything. She's due for her 8,000 mile maintenance. So I'm going to check everything out. Anyway, thank you. I hope that was informative for you on what to do in case your bike doesn't start and how you fix that. Not that hard, but a little bit messy, takes a little bit of time. But I think it's something within the capabilities of most anybody that's done some engine work. You don't have to crack the case, so it makes it a lot easier when you don't have to crack the case. All right, thank you. This is Adidas Guy. Don't forget to tune in to gstwins.com for everything GS500.